Hello, dear friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. This module is titled Marine Biodiversity, Temporal as well as Spatial Patterns. As you see, the world is mostly ocean. If you look at this kind of world, it's 73% is full of ocean. So it's 72% of the ocean covers the whole globe. It's mostly like the water. Now, what is the benefit of the ocean, the marine life to the humanity or the whole world or the whole biodiversity? How does that oceans matter? See, in the air that we breathe, 65% of oxygen comes from ocean. The marine life, that picoplanktons, Synechococcus and Prochlorococcus, these two small single-celled cyanobacteria does most of the photosynthesis on the planet Earth. So they produce oxygen, most of the oxygen that we breathe. There are several tangible as well as intangible goods produced by the marine biodiversity. This also include the petroleum that we use in our vehicles. So these goods and services offered by the marine biodiversity will be deliberated in today's module. Together, we will also talk about various zones, the marine zones, that biodiversity zones, intertidal zones, benthic zone, and the pelagic zone, neritic zone. All those zones will be covering. We'll also cover certain biologically mediated habitats produced by the marine biodiversity. This includes coral reef, seaweed bed, and seagrass meadows. Finally, we will be discussing about various threats that the marine biodiversity is suffering, including pollution, species invasion, species introductions, as well as the ocean acidification caused by anthropogenic factors. So now first we will see that the learning objectives, the outcomes of today's talk is to learn the overview and the importance of marine biodiversity, to learn about various ecosystem goods and services provided by the marine biodiversity, to learn about zonal classification of marine biodiversity, to learn about global patterns of the marine biodiversity, also to learn about the threats and challenges that are being offered by the biodiversity. World is mostly ocean, 71% of the surface encompass the ocean. Life originated in the ocean 4 billion years ago. Terrestrial colonization happened very recently, around 400 million years ago. Biodiversity, as per CBD, the biodiversity is defined as the variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes of which they are part. This includes diversity within species and of the ecosystems. However, marine biodiversity remains poorly known. A popular saying goes, we know more about moon than our own ocean. So most of the research innovations and research undertakings were targeted to the space as well as moon in comparison with the global marine biota, marine ecosystems. We have only 5 deep submergible, the vehicles that used for diving, for the world's oceans, and India don't have even one of that. But we do have a very good program for space explorations. But the marine biodiversity remains very poorly documented in terms of the whole the world biodiversity. So why marine biodiversity matter? More than 65% of the oxygen that we breathe come from the ocean, produced by 2 species of picoplanktons, that is cyanobacteria. Petrol and other petroleum products were all biomass of the marine organisms millions of years ago. Other ecosystem goods and services produced by the marine biodiversity include food, including fisheries and edible seaweeds, industrial products including agar, alginate, carrageenan, pearl, oysters, pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, and biochemical products from the marine organisms. Other industrial products from the marine organisms include paints, fertilizer, fodder, cosmetics, anti-fouling substances, glues, and so on. In addition, there are several ecosystem services offered by the marine biodiversity. This includes global oxygen production through phytoplankton by photosynthesis, atmospheric natural carbon capture and sequestration by marine algae, nutrient recycling by a number of biogeochemical cycles, cultural and aesthetic services as well. Marine aphrodite spines recently discovered to have potential applications in photon engineering, communication and biomedical engineering. Marine microbes have been recently discovered to be producing the electricity that has a potential applications in providing the economically viable electricity in rural areas. Marine bivalve shells have been described to have potentials for developing into tougher water resistant ceramics for biomedical and structural engineering. In addition, there are several warm glove services, including bequest value as well as existence value. Bequest value refers the public perception that the marine biodiversity is extremely important for generations of posterity, even though some of the organisms might not yet be useful for us directly. Its utility remains to be discovered. Existence value refers the value accredited by the marine ecosystem just by knowing its essence. Popular media such as BBC's Blue Planet documentary series have had tremendous impact on the people's perception of marine biodiversity, such that those who have never saw coral reef ecosystems by themselves could still appreciate of its importance by its mere existence. As you can see in this figure, zones of marine reef, there are several zones that you can see that in the figure. The first one is called splash zone, that is very near to the coast, where intertidal biodiversity is all located in, where high tide submerges while low tide make it out of this biodiversity. So there are several this called intertidal location, while the splash zone is little bit above the intertidal, where occasionally it gets water, water from the surf. Intertidal is in between the high tide mark and low tide mark. Well, intertidal as well as splash zone is part of the Neritic zone. It also includes the subtidal zone, where it's always submerged under the ocean. Even in the low tide, the subtidal region is under the ocean. And finally, towards the interior ocean, there is the open ocean. If after the continental dip, the area is known as the pelagic or open ocean area. So in the pelagic as well as in the Neritic zone, the top layer is called photic zone. So photic zone is a zone where the light penetrates in, while underneath the photic zone, which is around 100 meters to 150 meters, underneath that 150 meters submarine, if you travel by submarine, you will see that it is pitch dark. So there is no light ever penetrate below 150 meters deep in ocean. So that particular area, in the deeper ocean, the oceanic the bed is known as benthic or abyssal plain. First, we will see about the intertidal region. Intertidal region, also called U-littoral region, is a coastal area between the high tide mark and the low tide mark. Therefore, this area periodically gets submerged in water during high tides, while get exposed during low tides. Richest, most species among the oceanic zone. The most number of species is found in the intertidal region. A vast majority of described seaweed species are from the intertidal region. This region also supports a wide variety of marine animals as well, including crabs, sea cucumber, barnacles, limpets, isopods, mussels, starfish, sea anemone, and so on. Coming to the Neritic zone biodiversity, Neritic zone is the next zone towards the open ocean, but still inside the continental shelf area. So Neritic zone or continental shelf is the region beyond the intertidal habitat towards the open ocean, where the sea is moderately shallow, therefore making a steep incline at the fringe of the shelf. Typical depth is around 200 meters. Most exploited for the worlds of fisheries. Territorial waters are regions within 22.5 kilometers from the coast, while exclusive economic zone lies within 220 kilometers from the coast. Next is pelagic zone. Pelagic zone is in the open ocean beyond the continental shelf. So it's a water column of the open ocean beyond the continental shelf. The continental shelf makes a steep incline known as continental slope towards the open ocean. Typical length is 2 kilometers. Biodiversity includes phytoplankton, zooplankton, and picoplankton, marine bacteria, femtoplankton, marine viruses. Nectonic biodiversity of pelagic zone largely consists of bony or cartilaginous fishes, mollusks such as scallops and squids, crustaceans including arthropods such as lobsters and crabs. Coming to benthic biodiversity, which is the bottom dwellers, the region at the very bottom of the open ocean, the seabed or the abyssal plain. The region just above the benthic zone called demersal zone. Benthic as well as demersal zones are extremely less biodiverse region of the open ocean. However, benthic region of the coastal regions have very high biodiversity. Benthos are animals that live in the benthic zone: bivalves, sponges, polychaete worms, snails, cephalosports, crustaceans, clams, crabs. Benthos are mostly filter feeders and detrivores. Most of the benthic biodiversity remain unknown to the humanity, as deep diving equipment including manned submarines and unmanned remotely operated diving vehicles are necessary for its discovery and retrieval, and as of this writing only very few countries have such technological capabilities. Even the pelagic marine biodiversity largely remain undiscovered. For example, it was only recently that the colossal squid that can grow to the size of several meters in length has been fully described. Hydrothermal vent system is one of the highly specious or endemic hotspots. Submarine hydrothermal vents often forms features known as black smokers and consists of various chemotrophic and thermophilic bacteria. Typical temperature is as high as 465 degrees Celsius. Hydrothermal vents are found along the edge of tectonic plates and therefore volcanically active locations. The biodiversity other than the thermophilic bacteria encompass giant tube worms, limpets, clams, shrimp that depend upon the chemoautotrophic bacteria for their sustenance, a truly remarkable biodiversity found nowhere else on the planet. One of the prevailing theories explaining the origin of life on the planet Earth propounds that the life originated in these submarine hydrothermal vents. In addition, there are several biologically mediated marine habitats. These are the habitats in part constituted by the living organisms. This includes seaweed beds, seagrass meadows, and coral reef ecosystem. Serves as the breeding nursery grounds for the fishes and other marine animals, as a shelter for their sustenance, and as a refuge from the predators. Seaweed beds, the most important amongst the biologically mediated habitats, as they form the vast expanses of the productive clonal forests supporting the ecological niche. Extensive submarine forests of giant kelp, the brown seaweed Macrocystis pyrifera, have been reported from the cooler parts of many shallow ocean beds of the world. Seagrass meadows also serve as a productive biologically mediated ecosystem. Genera Zostera, Philospatix, Halophila form predominant seagrass meadows in the world. Seaweed beds and seagrass meadows slows down the currents and helps in the sedimentation. Extensive root system and rhizomes serve as a scaffold for reinforcing the seabed, ultimately helping to minimize the coastal erosion. Major primary producers of the ecosystems are of course based here in the seaweed beds as well as seagrass meadows. Coral reef ecosystems is yet another specialized biologically mediated habitat. Although an object of the media glory, coral reef ecosystem is comparatively less extensive, although highly productive ecosystem sometimes referred as the rainforest of the sea. The reef system is in fact a symbiosis between animal and cnidarian related to the sea animals and jellyfish, and an algae, a dinoflagellate, Symbiodinium, also called as zooxanthellae. The algae provide nutrients for the cnidarian, which grows and exudate calcium carbonate to support the exoskeletons, thereby forming the hard coral reef ecosystems. Barrier and fringe coral reefs are most abundant, while circular atoll coral reef systems are common among islands including Lakshadweep in India. World's largest coral reef ecosystem is found off the Queensland in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef. The reef ecosystem support turf and coralline algae, multitude of tropical fish species, invertebrates including sponges, sea urchins and sea slugs, sea snakes and so on. Coral reefs, albeit occupying less than 0.1% of the total oceanic area, support the life of more than 25% of the marine life, demonstrating its importance in marine biodiversity. Now coming to the global patterns of the biodiversity, the epicenter of the marine biodiversity is Indo-Malay archipelago. So in connection with the terrestrial pattern, there is no real obvious global patterns. The latitudinal gradient is non-existent in the case of marine reef. In the case of terrestrial, there is a good pattern that most of the diversity is centered around the tropics, and if you go poleward either towards the North Pole or towards the South Pole, the biodiversity gradually decreases. But in the case of ocean, that kind of trend is non-existent, at least in the case of the southern hemisphere. Now coming to the latitudinal pattern, the pattern is very interesting, that the most of the biodiversity is concentrated around Indonesia and Malaysia, the so-called Malay archipelago or Indo-Malay archipelago. So biodiversity decreases from this location on all directions, especially longitudinally, as well as when you go towards the north or south, the biodiversity tremendously decrease, or east to west also it decreases. So the reason is highly diverse habitats that sustain various life forms. So the habitat is starkly in contrast with the other habitats in this particular archipelago. So it supports a wide variety of marine organisms. So that is why the diversity is extremely high. It might also have something to do with the ring of fire. The Pacific ring of fire passes through that particular region. So this area is highly volcanic, and a lot of hydrothermal vents are seen near this Pacific archipelago, this Indo-Malay archipelago. So that could be one reason for that. So latitudinal gradient, as I just explained to you, is almost non-existent in the case of marine reef. But in the case of northern hemisphere, biodiversity gradually decreases from the equator towards the North Pole, but no such pattern exists in southern hemisphere. Marine biodiversity is rather high around Antarctica. So in Antarctica, marine diversity is quite high. I'm not saying about the Antarctican terrestrial diversity, I'm saying about the marine as well as submarine diversity of the Southern Ocean or the Antarctic Ocean, which is rather quite high and is comparable with that of the tropical oceans. Pelagic biodiversity is higher for the coastal regions than the open ocean. One estimate conclude that while there are only 1,200 species of pelagic fish, there are around 13,000 species of the coastal fish. However, the benthic biodiversity of the soft sedimentary seabed tend to increase from the shallow coastal region to the deep sea. Marine biodiversity tend to magnify in benthic zone rather than the pelagic zone. The reason is thought to be due to the origination of marine flora and fauna of the sediments of benthic region rather than in the pelagic water column. So because of the origination, that means that the life is originated in the sea, and most of the marine fauna is also originated in the sea in the benthos. So that's why probably that is the reason why benthos is highly species rich comparing with limnetic zone. Of course, there are several threats to the marine biodiversity as well. Ocean acidification due to the rising atmospheric carbon dioxide level is one of the main factors that is affecting the marine biodiversity. As the ocean gets more and more acidic, it's because the atmospheric carbon dioxide mixes with the water molecule and forms the carbonic acid, and the carbonic acid brings down the pH, so it becomes a lot more acidic. And ramification is that ocean acidification is not good for phytoplanktons, and also it hampers a number of the unicellular algae, especially the algae, the zooxanthellae or Symbiodinium, which is a dinoflagellate, which is in symbiotic association with coral reef ecosystems. So the rising oceanic acidity will hamper the growth of this symbiosis as well as this particular algae. So that will wreak havoc on the coral reef ecosystems of the world. Rising seawater levels affecting the fringe ecosystems, mangroves and estuaries. So seawater level is rising because of main factors, a lot of factors that is contributing on the rising seawater level, especially on because of the global warming. A number of glaciers is melting, as well as Antarctica, Antarctic, as well as in the Greenland, the massive ice sheets are melting, so that is also contributing to the rise in the sea level. So rise in the sea level is actually affecting the most of the coastal zones of the world. Over exploitation of the marine resources, anthropogenic pollution, higher nutrient load that will lead to the eutrophication, and ultimately that will cause hypoxia, that is actually reduced dissolved oxygen levels of the ocean. Eutrophication is a phenomenon in which massive algal blooms will result because of the higher nutrient levels of these particular regions. Marine litter and marine litter islands. So litter is nothing but rubbish. So if you throw out a number of rubbish, so it forms a huge islands of the Pacific Ocean as well as in the southern seas. Recently we have detected this kind of huge litter islands. Microplastics, so this is yet another main problems, especially with the cosmetics, shampoo and other industrial products do have a small minute number of microplastics. So the microplastic is that it can actually get inside the organisms that is actually living in the ocean. So it has been detected in zooplanktons as well as in nectants, including higher fishes. So the plastic is extremely dangerous for the marine fauna. So species invasion through the ballast water is yet another major cause of the oceanic pollution, and the ballast water is nothing but the water that is actually being used, pumped inside the ship, especially the cargo vessels, to offset the load, the cargo load that is actually given on the disembarkation port. So that ballast water, for example, a ship from India going to, for example, going to San Francisco with the Indian load, it actually offload all this cargo, and while coming back, otherwise if it comes back, without any load, it is not good for the ship. For its stability, it has to take something to balance the weight. So it takes the water from the San Francisco Bay Area and comes to Nehru Port, for example, in Bombay, and then offload all this water to the Bombay coastal region. So this water will contain a number of zoospores and other stuff, the marine fauna as well as flora. So all this marine flora and fauna is getting introduced to the coastal water. So the species introduction to the ballast water is a very important, a crucial determinant of the marine pollution. So in summary, global ocean remains to be least explored among the number of biotic zones of the world. So global ocean includes a number of zones that includes especially the intertidal region. Intertidal region is extremely important for the sustenance of human being as well as for other organisms of the world. So a number of goods and services are being produced by the ocean, world's oceans. So this includes the oxygen that the air we breathe in. More than 65% of the oxygen comes directly from the ocean, and also include a number of other biogeochemical cycles, including phosphorus and water. The tangible goods include fish. Fisheries resources are mostly coming from the ocean, and also industrial products as well as further biochemical products as well as seaweed based seaweed industry for hydrocolloid products like alginate, carrageenan and alginic acid. And the world's ocean is actually under tremendous threat from anthropogenic activities, especially with ocean acidification. So ocean acidification is a phenomenon wherein the carbon dioxide, excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere gets intermixed with the water to bring down its pH. So acidity is increased. So ocean acidification will have ramifications with coralline algae as well as coral reef ecosystem, and a number of associated problems also. And pollution is causing eutrophication. Then the eutrophication is massive a bloom of the marine algae, and that will bring down the dissolved oxygen level, a phenomenon called anoxia. So that will actually wreak havoc on the coastal locations around the world. Microplastic is yet another problem. So sustainable use of the marine biodiversity is the only option for the humanity looking towards the posterity. Thank you.